Hey you guys, I'm going to read out loud topic 2, homeostasis in organisms. As I'm reading, I'm going to be underlining important information, and I'm going to be annotating, making annotations next to the text. All living things, from the simplest celled bacteria to the most complex multicellular animals, are organized biological systems. To stay alive, all organisms must keep their biological systems stable, even though they live in a changing and sometimes life-threatening environment. To maintain this stability, organisms continually monitor and respond to changes in the environment. The internal stability that organisms maintain is called, or it's known as, homeostasis. Homeostasis is the maintenance of internal conditions within a narrow range that varies only slightly over time. For example, your body temperature must stay within a specific temperature range, approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius, for you to survive. If you become too hot or too cold, the biochemical processes that keep you alive will begin to fail. Basic biochemical processes of living organisms. Biochemical processes are the chemical processes that occur in living things. All organisms need both energy and raw materials, atoms and molecules, to carry on the internal biochemical processes that are essential for their survival. Two of these enzyme-controlled biochemical processes are photosynthesis and respiration. Photosynthesis is the process by which energy is stored in chemical bonds of organic molecules such as carbohydrates. Plants, algae, and many single-celled organisms carry out photosynthesis. Recall that respiration is the process by which a chemical energy stored in nutrients is released for use in cells. All living organisms carry out respiration. Storing energy, photosynthesis. The energy for life comes primarily from the sun. In Figure 2.1, notice the photosynthesis is the connection between the energy released by the sun and the energy available in living systems. The cells of organisms that carry out photosynthesis contain light-capturing molecules. In plant cells, these molecules are called chloroplasts, are located in the chloroplast, which are green-colored organelles where photosynthesis occurs. You may have seen these green structures on microscope slides of cells prepared from plant leaves. All plants, algae, and many one-celled organisms use solar energy to convert inorganic molecules into any one of several energy-rich organic compounds. One such organic compound is the sugar glucose, a simple carbohydrate. In the chemical reaction shown in Figure 2.3, notice that water and carbon dioxide from the environment are combined to make glucose. Oxygen gas, which also formed in the process, is released into the environment. What happens to the sugar produced by photosynthesis? Plant cells use the organic compounds such as glucose from photosynthesis in two ways. Their primary use is to generate ATP during cellular respiration, which is the process of releasing the energy into chemical bonds. Glucose is also used as a raw material for complex molecules, such as those listed in Table 2.1. Using glucose to produce ATP molecules. One way plants and animals use glucose is to generate high-energy molecules known as ATP. This process occurs during cellular respiration. Energy stored in chemical bonds of ATP molecules is the energy source for almost all life processes, from obtaining, transforming, and transporting materials to eliminating wastes. Because cell processes actually run on ATP rather than glucose, that transfer of energy from glucose to ATP is essential to both plants and the organisms that consume them. All organisms, not just plants and animals, use organic food compounds to supply the ATP energy they need to live, using glucose to build complex molecules. Cells also use glucose as the starting point for synthesis, and that forms complex organic compounds. For example, plants store much of glucose from photosynthesis as starch. Table 2.1 provides some examples of complex molecules and how they are used. When animals eat plants or other animals, they digest the complex molecules into simpler molecules for their own cells to use. Some of these molecules provide energy for the organism. For example, starches from plants and fats from animal cells can both be digested and used right away for energy. If they are not all needed for energy, the molecules can be stored as fat to provide a food reserve for animals. There's the table. I'm going to jump down to the questions. Number 1. In a plant cell, the synthesis of sugar compounds from inorganic raw materials occurs in the cell membrane, mitochondria, nucleus, or chloroplast. Number 2. Which word equation represents the process of photosynthesis? 1. Glucose alcohol plus carbon dioxide. 2. Carbon dioxide plus water yields glucose and oxygen. 3. Chlorophyll plus water yields glucose plus alcohol. Or 4. Glucose plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide and water. Number 3. Which factor least influences the rate of photosynthesis? 1. Atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide. 2. Time of day. 3. Number of chloroplasts. Or 4. Concentration of nitrogen in the air. Number 4. The basic raw materials of photosynthesis are 1. Sugar and carbon dioxide. 2. Oxygen and water. 3. Water and carbon dioxide. Or 4. Oxygen and sugar. Number 5. Which compound is formed as a common product of the process of photosynthesis? Number 6. In the test tube shown, what is produced by the snail that is used by the plant? 1. Oxygen. 2. Carbon dioxide. 3. Food. Or 4. Egg cells. Number 7. Which activity occurs during the process of photosynthesis? 1. Chemical energy from organic molecules is converted into light energy. 2. Organic molecules are absorbed from the environment. 3. Organic molecules are converted into inorganic food molecules. Or 4. Light energy is stored as a chemical energy in organic molecules. Number 8. Photosynthesis in plants requires chloroplasts and light energy. Identify 2 raw material plants also used in this process, and explain why these substances are needed. Releasing energy. Cell respiration. All living things need energy to stay alive. Before the energy and bonds of complex carbohydrates such as starch can be used, the molecules must be broken down or digested into simpler ones, such as glucose. Then the glucose must be broken down further. This process involves a series of chemical reactions controlled by enzymes, which are special proteins that affect the rate of chemical reactions. In the final step, the chemical bonds of the glucose molecule are broken, and the energy in those bonds is released. The process of releasing the energy in chemical bonds is called cellular respiration. In many organisms, cellular respiration requires oxygen, which must be brought into the organism from the environment. Obtaining oxygen from the environment and releasing carbon dioxide is a gas exchange. During cellular respiration, cells capture much of the energy that is released from the glucose bonds. The captured energy is then used to form new bonds in high-energy molecules known as ATP. Cellular respiration in many organisms is completed in organelles called mitochondria. Remember mitochondria? Mitochondria are common in animal cells. Cells that require more energy contain more mitochondria. For example, muscles require more energy to complete their functions than skin cells do. Muscle cells usually contain mitochondria, which corresponds with their increased energy needs. As they generate ATP, mitochondria release carbon dioxide and water molecules that came from fragments of molecules that were involved in the reactions. Most cellular processes use ATP as a direct source of energy. Review question number 9. Energy for use in cells is stored in the form of 1. Chemical bond energy, 2. Physical energy, 3. Heat energy, or 4. Mechanical energy. 10. In which process do organisms transfer the chemical bond energy in organic molecules to ATP molecules? 1. Excretion, 2. Cellular respiration, 3. Autotrophic nutrition, or 4. Photosynthesis. Number 11. Energy released from the cellular respiration of glucose is 1. First stored within ATP, 2. Stored in the liver as fat, 3. Turned into fat, or 4. Used directly for body activity. Number 12, the process during which energy is released from digested food is called 1. Cellular respiration, 2. Chemical digestion, 3. Photosynthesis, or 4. Excretion. Number 13, as a direct result of the life process called cellular respiration in humans, 1. Liquid wastes are eliminated from the body. 2. Food is digested and absorbed into the blood. 3. Energy is released from the digested food within the cells. Or 4. Nutrients are transported within the cells. 14. Which process involves the transfer of energy from carbohydrates to ATP molecules? 1. Photosynthesis. 2. Respiration. 3. Digestion. Or 4. Circulation. Number 5. During respiration, the energy within the bonds of a glucose molecule is released in small amounts in a step-by-step enzyme-controlled reaction. In this process, the energy released is used to 1. Synthesize ATP, 2. Control the process of diffusion, 3. Synthesize more glucose, or 4. Produce oxygen. Number 16. Which statement best describes one of the events taking place into the chemical reaction represented below? 1. Energy is being stored as a result of cellular respiration. 2. Energy is being released for metabolic processes. 3. Decomposition is being released for metabolic processes. Or 3. During respiration, the energy within the bonds of a glucose molecule is released in small amounts in a step-by-step enzyme-controlled reaction. In this process, the energy released is used to 1. Synthesize ATP, 2. Control the process of diffusion, 3. Synthesize more glucose, or 4. Produce oxygen molecules. Number 16. Which statement best describes one of the events taking place in the chemical reaction represented below? 1. Energy is being stored as a result of cellular respiration. 2. Energy is being released for metabolic processes. 3. Decomposition is taking place resulting in the synthesis of ATP. Or 4. Photosynthesis is taking place resulting in the storage of energy. 17. Compare photosynthesis and respiration with regard to each of the following: source of energy, materials used by each process, location of each process in the cell, and when each process occurs in plants and animals. Number 18. Which statement most accurately describes the process of respiration? 1. It occurs only in plants during the daylight hours and usually involves the exchange of gases. 2. It occurs only in plants during the daylight hours and involves taking in of preferred organic molecules. It occurs continuously in the cells of all organisms and involves the synthesis of carbohydrate molecules. Or 4. It occurs continuously in the cells of all organisms and often involves the exchange of gases. Number 19. During the daylight hours, green plants carry out photosynthesis. Do they also carry out respiration at this time? Support your answer. Base your answers to questions 20 through 22 on the diagram of a mitochondria below and on your knowledge of biology. Number 20. The process represented in the diagram is 1. Respiration, 2. Coordination, 3. Photosynthesis, or 4. Immunity. 21. What term would most appropriately be represented by the X? 22. What is present within the mitochondrion that allows the reaction to occur? Enzymes, chlorophyll, bacteria, or carbon dioxide? Enzymes. A catalyst is a substance that can affect the rate of chemical reaction without itself being changed or used up during the reaction. Because it is neither changed nor used up, the catalyst is capable of carrying out the same function again and again. Protein catalysts, known as enzymes, affect the chemical reactions in living things. The function of enzymes: biochemical processes such as digestion, breakdown, synthesis, cellular respiration, and photosynthesis are made possible in living things by enzymes. All living organisms contain enzymes. Enzymes interact with other molecules when they collide. Chemical reactions in living organisms are regulated by many different enzymes that function best at whatever the normal body temperature is for the organism. Importance of molecular shape. I'm going to circle that. Enzymes and several other molecules, such as hormones, antibodies, and receptor molecules on cell membranes, have specific shapes that influence both how they function and how they interact with other molecules. Many enzymes will interact with some substances, but not others. The enzyme salivary amylase, for example, acts on starches, but not proteins. In figure 2.6, notice how the shape of W, X, and Y fit together precisely. If the shape of an enzyme is altered, it will not interact with other molecules the way it must to catalyze a reaction, and its function will be impaired. Enzyme reaction rates. Several conditions, such as shape, temperature, and pH, can either speed up or slow down the rate of enzyme action. Shape. Enzymes are chain-like protein molecules that are folded into precise shapes. Each enzyme must have a specific shape to work correctly. Underline that. And anything that alters the shape will affect the enzyme's ability to function properly. High temperatures and strong acids or bases can change the enzyme's shape, either temporarily or permanently. When this happens, the enzyme cannot function. The reaction rate will decrease in proportion to the number of enzyme molecules that are altered. Temperature. Most enzymes have an optimum temperature that they function most efficiently and produce the highest reaction rate. For human enzymes, the temperature is typically 98.6. That's for humans. As the temperature of a cell or organism reaches its optimum level, enzymes and the molecules they are interacting with will move faster and collide more often, causing the reaction rate to increase. Beyond the optimum temperature, the rate falls rapidly because the fragile enzyme molecule begin to change shape or break apart. Trace the rise and fall of an enzyme reaction rate in figure 2.7. pH. The pH of a substance is a measure of what a substance is acidic, neutral, or basic. Placing enzymes in solutions of varying pH values affects their activity. Many enzymes work best at an optimum pH of about 7. Which is neutral. This makes sense since most body fluids and cells maintain a pH of near 7. However, some parts of organisms have cells maintain a pH of near 7. However, some parts of organisms have cells have typical pH values that are far from neutral. For example, the human stomach is acidic and has a pH of 2 or 3. So I'm going to write that this the 7 is neutral and 2 or 7 is acidic. The small intestine has a pH around 8. Enzymes in these locations typically have optimum rates that correspond to the pH of their environment, as shown in figure 2.8. Question 23. Only small amounts of enzymes are required for reactions within cells because enzymes are 1. Fragile, 2. Reuse small molecules or constantly synthesized. 24. Which cell organelle indicated in the diagram below controls the synthesis of enzymes? A, B, C, or D? 25. In order to survive, all organisms must carry out autotrophic nutrition, heterotrophic nutrition, enzyme-controlled reactions, or the process of reproduction. Number 26. Which group of organic compounds includes these enzymes? Proteins, carbohydrates, sugars, and fats. 27. Luciferin is a molecule that, when broken down in fireflies, produces heat and light. The rate at which luciferin is broken down in cells is controlled by a carbohydrate, a simple sugar, an enzyme, or a complex fat. Number 28. At which point on the graph below can the rate of an enzyme activity be increased by increasing the concentration of sugar molecules? 1, 2, 3, or either 2, 3, or 4. Which statement best describes the relationship between enzyme action and temperature shown in the graph below? 1. Enzyme synthesis begins at 30 degrees Celsius. 2. Enzyme activity constantly increases with increasing temperature. 3. The pH has a greater effect on the enzyme than temperature does. Or 4. Enzyme activity increases as the temperature increases from 32 to 34 degrees Celsius. Number 30. The enzyme salivary amylase will act on starch but not on protein. This action illustrates that salivary amylase contains starch, is chemically specific, is not reusable, or lacks proteins. Number 31. The graph below shows the effect of temperature on the relative rate of action of enzyme X on protein. Which change would not affect the relative rate of action of enzyme X? The addition of cold water when the reaction is at 50 degrees Celsius, an increase in temperature from 70 degrees to 80 degrees, the removal of protein when the reaction is 30 degrees, or a decrease in temperature from 40 to 10 degrees Celsius. 32. Enzymes influence chemical reactions in living systems by becoming part of the product after the reactions occur, combining with atmospheric gases to form waste products, affecting the rate at which reactions occur, or 4. Absorbing water during synthesis and digestion. Number 33. The diagram below represents 3 steps in digestion of the sugar sucrose. In this diagram, structure X is most likely 1. A molecule of oxygen, 2. The end product, 3. An enzyme molecule, or 4. The sugar. Number 34. Explain what is happening during steps 1 through 3 in the following diagram. Use the labels A, B, C, and D to help you with your explanation. As part of your answer, indicate which molecule represents the enzyme on the product and the product. 35. Is this reaction an illustration of synthesis or digestion? Support your answer. And 36. Explain why heating these molecules might slow the rate at which reaction occurs. A student is studying the effect of temperature on the action of a protein digesting enzyme that is contained in stomach fluid. An investigation is set up using 5 identical test tubes. Each test tube contains 40 milliliters of stomach fluid as well as 20 milliliters glass tube filled with cooked egg white, as shown in the diagram. After 48 hours, the amount of egg white digested in each tube was measured. The data collected are shown in the following table. 37. Identify the independent variable in this investigation. Gastric fluid, length of glass tubing, temperature, or 4 time. Remember, independent variable. Number 38. State the amount of digestion that might be expected after 48 hours in a test tube that is identical to the other 5 test tubes, but at a temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. Less than 2.5 millimeters, between 2.5 and 4 millimeters, between 4 and 7.5 millimeters, or more than 7.5 millimeters. 39. The best graph of the results of the investigation would be made by plotting the data on which set of axes? 1, 2, 3, or 4. 40. The student repeated this same experiment using a glass tube containing potato instead of egg white. After 48 hours, he found no evidence of any digestion. Explain why no digestion occurred. 41. During the winter, many fish eat very little. Some students thought this might be because less oxygen is dissolved in the cold winter water than in the same water during the warm summer months. The students tested the water and found that cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water. They also discovered that fish have nearly as much food available during the winter as in the summer. Explain why the fish eat very little during the winter. Feedback and homeostasis. Because an organism's external and internal environment is constantly changing, its homeostasis is constantly threatened. As a result, living things must monitor and respond to changes in the environment. Stability results when the organism detects deviations in the environment and responds with an appropriate corrective action that returns the organism's systems to normal. If an organism's monitoring systems or control mechanisms fail, disease or even death can result. As you go about your daily task, your body temperature readjusts, your heart and breathing rates alter slightly, and your blood flow increases or decreases if your monitoring were to fail. These small adjustments would not be made. Soon your body's homeostasis would begin to deteriorate. Under extreme conditions, you could become quite ill or even die. However, simple corrective actions usually take care of problems with your homeostasis and life goes on. Some of the examples of responses organisms have to change they can encounter are shown in Table 2.4. Dynamic equilibrium. Organisms have a variety of mechanisms that maintain the physical and chemical aspects of the internal environment within the narrow limits that are favorable for cell activities. The stability that results from these responses is called homeostasis, or a steady state. To many biologists, the phrase steady state suggests An unchanging condition. They prefer to use the term dynamic equilibrium. To describe the constant small corrections that normally keep the internal environment within the limits needed for survival. In figure 2.9, notice that these small corrections include normal range of variations. Certain microorganisms or diseases can interfere with dynamic equilibrium and therefore with homeostasis. Organisms, including humans, have mechanisms to deal with such interference and restore the normal state. Homeostatic adjustments have their limits. They can operate only within certain set ranges. Feedback mechanisms. A feedback mechanism involves a cycle in which the output of a system feeds back to either modify or reinforce the action taken by the system. A variety of feedback mechanisms have evolved for helping organisms detect and respond to stimuli, which are changes in the environment. Multicelled organisms detect and respond to change both at cellular level and at the organism level. Their systems detect deviations from the normal state and take corrective actions to restore homeostasis. Feedback responses can be single or complex. A simple feedback response may involve a hormone that regulates a particular chemical process in a cell. A complex feedback response might be an elaborate behavior such as bird migration. Positive feedback. Feedback mechanisms can either be positive or negative. In positive feedback systems, a change prompts a response, which leads to a greater change and a greater response. Childbirth is an example of a positive feedback system. The first contractions push the baby's head against the base of the uterus, which causes stronger contractions in the muscles surrounding the uterus. This increases the pressure of the baby's head against the base of the uterus, which causes stronger contractions and so on. Eventually, the baby is born and the feedback cycle ends. So I'm going to put positive feedback. Sounds kind of like a chain reaction to me. Negative feedback. Negative feedback or systems are the most common. In this case, a change in the environment can prompt System 1 to send a message, often a hormone, to System 2, which responds by attempting to restore homeostasis. When System 1 detects that System 2 has acted, it stops signaling for further action. So, negative feedback is just a signal or a message. A typical house heating system is an example of negative feedback. The furnace has a thermostat that is set to a specific temperature, called the set point. When the room cools below the set point, the thermostat sends a message to turn on the furnace. When the room temperature rises above the set point, the thermostat stops sending the message and the furnace shuts down. Regulating human body temperature uses a similar system. A structure in the brain detects the temperature of the blood is too low. This brain structure then sends a signal to muscles, causing them to contract and relax in rapid cycles. The result is shivering, which generates body heat. When shivering has sufficiently warmed the body and blood, sensors in the brain detect the change and the signal to shiver stops. Negative feedback and cell-organ system interaction. Maintaining dynamic equilibrium often involves interactions between cells in the body, organs, or systems. For example, certain cells in the bodies monitor the level of glucose in the blood. When the glucose level is above normal limits, an endocrine organ called the pancreas secretes insulin. Insulin is resulting in a hormone that prompts glucose to move from the blood into the body cells, resulting in lower glucose. So insulin lowers glucose. Another hormone secreted by the pancreas works in the opposite way. When the glucose level in the body is too low, this hormone prompts the release of glucose stored in the liver. The negative feedback process involves insulin, is shown in figure 2.1. Other examples of cell organ feedback interactions include increased muscle activity is often accomplished by an increase in heart rate and breathing rate. If this did not occur, the muscles would not receive the increase in blood flow and oxygen they need to continue working. When plant leaves detect a shortage of water, guard cells, or specialized cells that surround pores on the surface of the leaf, change shape to close the pores and reduce evaporation. The process is shown in figure 2.12. 42. Some plants respond to light with a sudden enlargement of their leaf pores. This response is important because it enables the plant to increase its intake of carbon dioxide, soil, oxygen, or nitrogen. An increase in the blood's level of thyroid gland hormones decreases the release of thyroid-stimulating hormone. This mechanism illustrates negative feedback, enzyme action, immune response, or positive feedback. Maintenance of the pH of human blood within a certain range is an example of chemical digestion, synthesis, respiration, or dynamic equilibrium. Homeostasis is illustrated in the body by the effects of insulin on the amount of proteins digested, amino acids absorbed into the blood, oxygen transport to the lungs, or glucose in the blood. 46. The chart below shows the amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide exchanged through the skin and lung of a frog for a period of 1 year. The lowest rate of gas exchange is most likely the result of increased mating activity, elevated body temperature, environmental conditions, or competition with other species. A student is frightened by a loud noise, which results in a hormone being released into the blood. The hormone causes the student's heart to beat rapidly. The two systems that work together to cause this reaction are the endocrine system that secretes the hormone and the nervous system, reproductive system, excretory system, or digestive system. 48. Which important human processes is represented in the diagram below? Coordination, digestion, excretion, or cell respiration. 49. Describe what normally happens to a person's blood sugar level soon after he or she eats a meal that contains carbohydrates. 50. Describe the role of insulin in regulating blood sugar levels. 51. On a sheet of graph paper, mark an X and a Y axis, then draw a line representing the relative blood sugar levels for two individuals, person A and person B, over a 5-hour period after a meal. Both people ate the same foods. Person A produces a normal amount of insulin and person B does not. Explain any difference in the lines representing person A and person B. 52. During hot weather and vigorous exercise, people sweat. As the water on their skin evaporates, the water molecules absorb heat energy. Explain why this process is important to the individual. Many different feedback mechanisms have evolved over time. These mechanisms allow an organism to respond to change in both its internal and external environment. Select an organism from those you have learned about and describe how a specific feedback process works with the organism. Include how the feedback specifically helps the organism maintain homeostasis. Last section, disease as a failure of homeostasis. Disease is any condition that prevents the body from working as it should. As a result, the body may fail to maintain homeostasis. Disease in humans may result from foreign invader organisms called pathogens, or from abnormal cells in the body and lead to cancer. Disease may also result from toxic substances, poor nutrition, organ malfunction, an inherited disorder, or risky personal behavior. All can lead to disruption of the body's ability to function normally. That is, to maintain homeostasis. Sometimes the onset of disease becomes apparent right away, as in some case with birth defects or poisoning. Sometimes, however, the disease may not show up for many years, as in the case with lung cancer caused by exposure to tobacco smoke. For examples of these kinds of diseases are noted in Table 2.5. Pathogens. There are many potentially dangerous disease-causing organisms in the air, water, and food we take in every day. A variety of pathogens, viruses, bacteria, and fungi, and other parasites can interfere with our normal functioning and make us seriously ill. Plants and other animals can also be infected by these similar organisms. Some examples of pathogens and the diseases they cause are shown in Table 2.6. Cancer. Certain genetic mutations in a cell can result in uncontrolled cell division called cancer. Exposing cells to certain chemicals and radiation increases mutations, thus increasing the chance of cancer. In this disease, genes that control and coordinate a cell's normal cycle of growth and division are altered by mutation. As a result, the cell begins to divide abnormally and uncontrollably. The result is a mass of abnormal cells referred to as a tumor. Once they are identified, often by abnormal proteins on their surfaces, cancer cells may be attacked by the immune system and destroyed. If the immune system is unable to destroy the cancer cells, the disease may become life-threatening. The immune system. Humans have many ways of protecting themselves from danger and disease. For example, our eyes, ears, and sense of smell help us detect danger. when we release hormones that stimulate emergency responses to danger. Our muscles allow us to fight off some threats and to flee from others. Our skin, when unbroken, keeps out many foreign organisms that could be harmful. Our tears, saliva, and other body secretions trap or destroy invaders that come into contact with them. Our nervous system provides rapid coordination of many of our responses to danger. Once invaded, however, the body needs an effective way to combat invaders or body cells that malfunction. The immune system is the body's primary defense against disease-causing pathogens. Pathogens, foreign substances, or cancer cells that threaten our homeostasis can usually be identified by molecules on their outer surfaces or membranes. These molecules, called antigens, trigger a response from the immune system. Toxins, the poisonous waste of certain pathogens, can also act as antigens. All cells have potential antigens on their surfaces. However, the immune system can usually tell the difference between the molecules of self cells, which belong to the body, and non-self or foreign cells, which come from outside the body. When cells of our immune system recognize foreign antigens, specialized white blood cells and antibodies attack them and the cells that display them. White blood cells and antibodies. Some white blood cells are specialized to surround and engulf invading pathogens that are recognized as a threat. Others produce antibodies, proteins that either attack the invaders or mark them for killing. The marked invaders may then be destroyed by other white blood cells in Figure 213. Notice the Y-shaped antibodies that match the shape of antigens. Most of the antibodies in white blood cells that attack an invader break down soon after they have defended the body. However, some specialized white blood cells will remain. These cells are capable of quickly dividing and producing more antibodies of the same kind to fight off later invasions of the same microbes. Antibodies are effective even against microbes that appear years later. Vaccinations. Scientists have discovered that weakened microbes or pathogens, or even parts of microbes, can stimulate the immune system to react. The antigens found in the live pathogens are usually present in the weakened or killed ones, as shown in Figure 2.1. Vaccines are made using these weakened, killed, or parts of pathogens. When vaccines are injected in the body, the immune system responds just as it had been invaded by a live pathogen. It produces antibodies. These antibodies can attack and destroy any of the pathogens that is still present in the body. Damage to the immune system. A person's immune system may weaken with age or other factors. Stress and fatigue, for example, can lower our resistance and make us more vulnerable to disease. Some viral diseases, such as AIDS, result from the attack of the immune system. Damage from the disease may leave the person with AIDS unable to deal with infections and cancerous cells. Their weakened immune system is one reason people with AIDS often die of infections that a healthy immune system would easily destroy. Problem associated with the human response. Although our immune system is essential for our survival, it creates problems for some people. These people have an allergy, a rapid immune system reaction to environmental substances that are normally harmless. Examples of such substances include certain food, pollen, and chemicals from insect bites. In people with allergies, the immune system reacts by releasing histamines. This leads to anything from a runny nose and sneezing to rash and swelling. It is the swelling that makes some allergies dangerous. Occasionally, the throat swells, interfering with the victim's ability to breathe. People with allergies often use antihistamines to reduce the effects of the histamines and the symptoms they cause. Sometimes the immune system fails to recognize the self molecules and attacks the body's own cells. For example, in some cases, the immune system attacks and destroys the pancreas cells that produce insulin. The result is one type of diabetes. Since transplanted organisms come from another person, they have foreign antigens on their cells. As a result, the immune system recognizes transports as invaders and attacks them. To avoid rejection of their new organ, transplant patients receive injections of special drugs to reduce the effectiveness of their immune system. Of course, because the immune system's ability to protect the transplant patient from normal pathogens is reduced, the patient may become ill from the pathogen that would normally be no threat. Last section of questions. Number 54. When a person is suffering from an infection such as strep throat or chickenpox, his blood usually shows a significant increase in the number of enzymes, antibodies, hormones, or sugars. 55. When microscope slides are stained to show blood cells, the small red blood cells that appear on the slides are much more numerous than the large white blood cells. This supports the concept that the body's need for white blood cells is less than the need for red. Red cells are more numerous because they are smaller than white blood cells. The nuclei of the white blood cells helps them work more efficiently than red blood cells with lack of nuclei, or each kind of cell is present in the numbers best suited to meet the needs of the body. 56. Which response usually occurs after an individual receives a vaccination for the influenza virus? Hormones in the blood stop reproduction of the virus. Pathogens from the vaccine deactivate the virus. Enzymes released from the antigen to digest the virus, or antibodies against the viruses are found in the blood. A patient has just received an organ transplant. Which treatment would be most effective in preventing the patient's body from rejecting the organ? Treat the patient with medications that decrease the immune system's response. Treat the patient with antibiotics to fight off a positive viral infection. Restrict the patient's salt intake or give the patient blood transfusions. Number 58. The body makes chemicals that can help destroy harmful viruses and bacteria. These chemicals are called antibodies, vaccines, hormones, or antibiotics. 59. A vaccine can protect you against a disease because it destroys toxic substances from bacteria before they can make you sick, stimulates your immune system against the pathogen, kills any pathogenic bacteria in your body, or changes pathogenic bacteria into harmless bacteria. 60. The body is protected against harmful flu viruses by red blood cells and hormones, white blood cells and antibodies, white blood cells and enzymes, or red blood cells and antibodies. 61. In some people, substances such as peanuts, eggs, and milk cause an immune response. This response is usually harmless substances and most similar to the action of the heart as the intensity of exercise increase, mechanism that regulates the activity of the guard cells, action of which white blood cells when certain bacteria enter the body, or mechanism that maintains the proper level of antibiotics in the blood. 62. Parasitic strains of E. coli may produce poisonous chemicals that attack living tissue and cause disease in humans. These chemicals are called antibodies, toxins, viruses, or antibiotics. 63. Uncontrolled cell division is known as meiosis, cancer, antibody production, or sexual reproduction. Number 64. The resistance of the body to a pathogen is called immunity, antigen, cancer, or infection. 65. Diseases can be caused by inherited disorders, exposure to toxic substances, organ malfunction, and certain personal behaviors. Choose two of the above causes and for each give one specific example of an associated disease. 66. Our immune system normally helps us resist infection and disease. Sometimes, however, it may actually work against us by attacking certain tissues or organs in the body. State one example of the immune system attacking the body and explain how we try to counteract that problem. Last question for this topic, 67. Vaccinations play a major role in medicine today. Explain the role of vaccines in the prevention of disease. Your answer must include at least a description of the contents of a vaccine, a description of how a vaccine protects the body from disease, and one specific reason certain vaccinations are required for students to attend public schools.